Welcome everyone to this special edition of Get Your Game On, the channel dedicated to immersive gaming experiences. I'm so excited today to be sharing with you guys a project we've been working on for quite some time now. It's immersive, but it's not VR. It's real life, and it's virtual pinball. Now, arguably, there's nothing more immersive than an actual pinball machine itself. On the other hand, there's over 80 pinball machines on this unit. Be hard to fit 80 pinball machines in this room, let alone be able to afford that many. So, this is a project, for those of you that don't know, my mother is very much into Pinball FX3. She plays it all the time. And did I mention my mother is 85 years old? And she's still pretty dang good. She actually even wins in tournaments quite often on there, and at the very least finishes in the top 3. So, about a year ago, I was poking around on YouTube and I stumbled across a couple videos from Terry Red and also Major Frenchy. And I found out, holy cow, there's this whole virtual pinball world out there that I had no idea of. Now, I knew there was pinball machines on a computer, but this takes it to a whole nother level. And this community has done some amazing things. It just blew my mind. And I quickly realized I need to build one of these for my mother. Now, I also quickly realized to do it right, there was no way I was going to be able to afford it. So thankfully, the master fabricator, Daryl, and my better half, Brenda, decided to go in partners with me to build this one-of-a-kind, unique, state-of-the-art virtual pinball cabinet. Now, most of the time, you'll see a virtual pinball table built to look just like a pinball machine itself. They've got the big backboard and the flat play field in the front. But since we were building this for my mother, we had to adapt it and come up with a unique design that would fit her needs. Let me share some of those designs with you now. So the first thing that was important was that my mother be able to sit at the pinball machine. And we also wanted to be able to stand at it in case we came over and wanted to play like a hot seat version where we wanted to trade spots. Sitting down is kind of difficult to do. So what we did is we actually put this on electric legs, just like you'd find on a desk. And basically, she can lower this all the way down and sit at it and play. Or if we come over, we can raise it up, and then we can all play standing up just like you would on a traditional pinball machine. Now that's the reason that we have the screen tilted at this angle. That's in order that she can sit and play and still see the screen. This is about a 50-degree angle. That's where we found we got a good tilt. We got the screen to look fairly good. We didn't lose a lot of the coloring or anything like that, but it also works standing up. We have a back glass here, which is another television, which shows your backboard, and then also we have our DMD scoreboard, which comes up right here. And the other really cool thing about this is that it's all self-contained. So basically it's a one-button start. You push this button, it powers up the televisions, it powers up the computer, it powers everything up. So it's not a whole bunch of different systems that you have to turn on separately. The other really cool thing that we did was we basically got this real-life lockdown bar. This is out of an actual pinball machine itself. So this is legitimate width here, legitimate pinball width. And then all our buttons, our flipper buttons on the sides, are all standard measured out to match an actual pinball table. So we also have a volume knob here, which is handy for her to be able to adjust the volume on the fly. One button mute if she gets a phone call. And then we also have our game emulator buttons. So this is basically running a Xbox 360 controller emulator. So we have our A button, B button, our X and Y buttons here. I also have a hidden button behind the coin door slot that allows me to get into some special programming in there and do some special things behind the scenes in case we need to do that. Also have our cursor keys left, right, up, and down here so you can navigate menus. And we added 2 USB slots down here just in case we need to plug in a keyboard or a mouse for some reason, or if we have to do a software update, we can plug a flash drive in there and have access to the USB ports. So this plunger, which is really cool, is out of an actual pinball machine as well. So actual pinball parts matched with some software and some other buttons to give us this one-of-a-kind, unique virtual pinball cabinet. So you might be asking yourself, well, what's so special about a virtual pinball cabinet? I mean, basically, didn't you just take a screen, turn it sideways, and then just build a cabinet around it to put your flipper buttons in? No, that's only the start. There is so much more to a virtual pinball machine. Well, let me give you an example. So we have this plunger here. Now, this is a physical plunger. I can touch it. Watch this virtual plunger in the game. So watch right here. When I grab this plunger and I pull it back, the plunger moves. I can pull it back a lot, a little. It's basically, this is moving my plunger. So if I come all the way back, let it go, I just launch the ball like you would in a real pinball machine. Isn't that cool? So let me share with you another really cool feature of a virtual pinball cabinet. So I've got to give a shout out real quick to a guy named Swiss Lizard who programmed a little thing called Direct Output Framework. He and another gentleman by the name of DDH69, who programmed a little thing called DOF Links, gave us the ability to add hardware to our virtual pinball cabinets. So this machine right here has a series of solenoids behind the screen and then a few down here, along with a shaker motor that sits at the bottom of the cabinet. And basically what happens is, whenever I shoot a ball up and it hits like a bumper or a slingshot, or if I press a flipper, you're going to actually hear the solenoid fire. And when you're playing the machine, you can actually feel the solenoid fire. So I've got the sound completely muted, completely off. Everything you're going to hear is from the actual physical solenoids in the machine. So again, we got the plunger. And then basically, when I fire this thing up, hear that, and then flipper, and then if I can get those bumpers up there, those are all physical solenoids in the machine. And you actually feel them in the machine itself. Whenever you're clicking on a flipper, you can feel that click. Whenever you bounce it off of a side slingshot, you can feel that. It just adds all of this tactile force feedback to the game. And let me tell you, after playing with it and then turning it off, it's almost like playing with no sound. I mean, it adds that much immersion to the virtual pinball cabinet. So we're not quite done talking about the interactive and immersive features of a virtual pinball machine just yet. So you'll see I've got the ball locked up on the flipper. Keep a close eye on that. I'm going to nudge the table left and right here. And see what happens? The ball moves. So a virtual pinball table also has the ability to sense nudging or moving left or right or up and down. Keep an eye on it. I'm going to give it a good shove forward here and watch what happens. See the ball moves up and down? So when you combine this nudge feature along with the solenoids and the interaction of the plunger, it truly makes one of these virtual pinball tables a lot more than just a screen turned sideways. So let's start by telling you how all this magic works. So we are going to be dealing with some sensitive electronics here. So I'm going to go ahead and put an electric static mat down. As you can see, I already have my anti-static wrist guard on. And the heart and soul of getting this pinball machine to work is this little piece right here. And this is from Zeb's Boards. And this is a pretty cool deal. You basically take this little unit from them and you purchase just a regular old pinball machine plunger. We actually bought this from a pinball supply store, and it's an actual plunger for an actual pinball machine. And what you're going to do is you actually will mount this into the cabinet, and then this actually mounts in here. And this part here actually connects to this little piece, which moves a potentiometer up and down. And this emulates an axis of a joystick. For example, on the 360 controller. This is one of your joystick axes, and that's what allows you to basically use a real plunger and transfer that data into the game to make the plunger itself work. And if you turn this over, this is what is really cool about Zeb's boards. He's got this very small circuit board on the bottom, plugs into a USB, but it's got an accelerometer. So basically, when you nudge the machine, it senses that movement, and that's how you get your nudge function and possibly your tilt function. In addition to this, this is also a button emulator. So you plug all your buttons, like the flipper buttons and your enter buttons and your cursor buttons, all go in here, and they're all programmed, and that's how you basically get all the buttons to work. So this little unit right here basically is responsible for all the plunger action, the nudge function, and all the button controls. It's a really cool piece, and I'm glad I found this thing. So definitely recommend it if this is something you're into. Zeb's Boards, from what I can tell, is the leader in virtual pinball stuff. So highly recommend them. So to get the tactile function from all the bumpers, we basically got these automotive starter solenoids. And these automotive starter solenoids are just, you find them on any car, and we've mounted them in a bank series. So we've actually got 6 that will go behind the playfield, behind the screen itself, and they'll be in the middle of the screen and at the top of the screen. And you wire each of these solenoids to this other board from Zeb, and this basically is the brains behind how the solenoid should fire. So you basically wire each solenoid to one of the inputs on this board, and then when you plug this into the computer will tell it which solenoid to fire on the playfield to best emulate where the bumpers are firing. So you're going to have 6 solenoids across the playfield. You're going to have 2 more, 1 for each flipper, and then another 2 that are going to simulate the slingshots down at the bottom of the screen. So, and this is a really nice piece. Zeb does some quality stuff, and I've got to say, when I got this in, I was blown away by the quality. It's every bit as good of a circuit board as I would expect from one of the major manufacturers like, Asus or Gigabyte or anybody like that. I mean, this is a really quality piece. So hats off to Zeb Boards and Steve over there. Really nice work. So let's talk next about the brains of this virtual pinball cabinet. Obviously, it needs a computer. So we decided to repurpose this old system that I built 10 years ago in 2011. This is an old AMD Phenom 2 chip, and we added a 1080 to it, and we're going to get rid of these old style hard drives, and we're going to actually upgrade it with a solid state to make it a little bit faster. Now, we don't need all of this extra. In this case, it's huge. So what we did was take all the core components and put them on this little test bench chassis. This thing's a lot smaller form factor, so it fits in the cabinet a lot better. And then it's very open, so it's going to provide a lot of airflow to all the components. And this worked out perfectly for the virtual pinball table. Now, we had a dilemma. We were trying to figure out a proper audio solution. Again, this is going in a senior living apartment with my mother, who's 85, so we didn't need a 7.1 surround system or anything like that. We just needed something that was compact, was the most important thing. And we looked at a bunch of different solutions, and then it came to us. We had 2 32-inch televisions that had speakers that are already small and compact and sound pretty good. So what we did was we actually took one of the televisions apart, and the reason we didn't just leave the speaker in the TV because it would be mounted sideways, so you'd get all the audio out of the side of the machine and you wouldn't get any of your stereo effect. So instead what we did is we took this speaker out of the television and we're going to mount this right below the playfield, and it's going to face the player. It's basically going to be pointing straight up at the player, and it should provide us with very good sound in a very small form factor. Now, I will caution you, do not tear into your $500 television unless you know what you're doing. The components these days are very delicate, and you can very easily hurt the television. And obviously, this will probably void the warranty, I would say. Just a guess. Anyways, so this was a great solution that we came up with, and we're really happy with the results. So now that I had figured out kind of the computer components and all the electronics that we needed for this thing, it was time to start the physical build of the cabinet itself. And for that, we once again enlisted the help of the master fabricator, Daryl, and turned him loose on building this cabinet and getting all the physical pieces put together. So Daryl did all the woodworking, and he actually even did the welding for the back support that holds that back TV in place. So back in March, after we decided to tackle this project, we started off pretty simply just by taking a couple computer monitors, turning one sideways, and just making sure that we could actually get the play field to work on one screen while we had the back glass and the scoreboard on the back screen. And all we did was use a Xbox 360 controller to test it out, and it worked pretty good. So we started at that point by actually getting our 4K QLED monitors, and we put together this really rough mock-up station. This was literally built with duct tape, as you can see, and some clamps. And this was just designed that we could put the actual TVs in place, play with the angle to see what the right angle would be for sitting and standing, and that it would look right, and get an idea of what this thing might look like with the actual 4K screens that we wanted to use. And so here you can see we've got that mocked up. And even at this early stage, I can tell you, we knew we were onto something special, because even just playing on the two screens, it was different than playing on the desktop. It was pretty cool, and it got us excited to move on with the build. So the next phase was to build a cardboard prototype. And since this was a design that we were kind of coming up with on the fly, we weren't really following anybody else's pattern, we wanted to make sure that we got the controls in a good spot, make sure they ergonomically worked for, pressing the buttons and the cursors and all that good stuff. So we mapped everything out on cardboard and put the buttons in and kind of made sure we liked the layout. And after moving things a 1/4 inch here and 1/2 inch there, we came up with the design that we liked. And once we had that done, it was time to get to building the actual machine itself. And we started off by doing a base and putting the legs on it. And here you can see, once we had that done, we went ahead and put our mock-up of our cardboard unit on there, just to once again make sure everything was as we expected it to be. And then once that was done, we went ahead and Daryl built this like front quarter piece for the pinball. So we wanted to make sure we had all the right tooling, we had the right drills and saws and all that to be able to get all the switches and buttons in the actual final wood piece. And if we were going to have any problems, we wanted to find them out now before we invested a bunch of other wood into the final pieces. And we really spent a lot of time kind of figuring out where everything needed to be, figured out how to drill them properly so everything would mount. And then we also wanted to make sure that all the switches and everything fit in there, make sure we kind of had an idea of where the wiring would go, make sure nothing interfered, and it would all go together as we had envisioned. So after we were done with that, it was time to actually head to the local hardware store and actually pick out our final wood for the actual cabinet. And I'm a little particular, so we spent a little time going through the stacks, finding a piece of wood that actually had a really nice wood grain and pattern to it that would look good on the final unit. And once we found that, we bought it, loaded it up in the truck, and headed back to the house, where Daryl then disassembled that initial cardboard mock-up and laid it out on there so we could see where we wanted all the wood grain pattern to go and make sure everything fit the way we wanted it to. And then it was time to start making pieces. So Daryl got to work cutting out all our pieces and parts and starting to get the pieces of the puzzle together so we could actually start making this thing. you can see here our initial build of the actual final cabinet, and you can see it's all 90 degrees, just starting to go together on the corners. And then Daryl went in and started actually rounding the corners. He did a really nice job of bullnosing all the 90-degree edges, so it gave it a really refined look. And then also, obviously, putting all the holes in for the switches and buttons, and routering out the space for the lockdown bar and all that good stuff. So turned out really good. You can see here all the cuts are finally made, and you can see all the final detail work he did on all the edges. It looks great. Then we started getting the part together that was going to hold the TVs at the angle and on the back, getting that all put together. And then it was just a matter of taking all the pieces, gluing them together, and mounting them with brackets and all that stuff, and getting it in a final state to where then we could start putting it together. So once we were done with that, Brenda did the stain. We found a nice oak stain, and it has some polyurethane in it to give the cabinet a little extra protection. And then once that was dry, it was time to start putting pieces in it. So here we go. We start taking all these pieces that we've been working on for the last year and collecting, and start putting them into the actual cabinet. And you can see here, there was a lot to go in there. You can see the amplifier for the audio right there, and then the trays that we ran all the wiring in. And yeah, there was just a lot of pieces to go into this thing to get it to all work. And we finished off the back pieces. These are the two covers. Daryl routed out the area for the fans, did a really nice job, so everything fit perfectly. And these are removable so that we can actually get to any of the components we need to in the future. Here you can see we've actually got the computer mounted in the cabinet, along with the surge protector and the power strips. And then if we move to the upper deck, you can see where Daryl has mounted the control boards, the 12-volt power supply, along with all the fuses and relays for protection. And then you also see all the solenoids there. And came together really nicely. In fact, I shot a video right when he finished all the wiring before we put the screens on. I'm going to show that to you here. So Daryl just finished the final wiring connections on our virtual pinball cabinet. I wanted to give you a tour of his handiwork before we install the screens and cover it all up. You can see here we finally have our speaker installed. This is the speaker that we pulled out of the other television, and we have it mounted under this bracket here that has our solenoids on it, and will also hold the television in this little groove along with the grooves on the side. So the other awesome part of this is when you push this button, it's going to turn on the entire system. It's a one-button push to start it up, and that will start up our computer, which will then in turn send a signal to this first relay, and that relay will tell this power strip to turn on. This power strip will turn on the amplifier for the audio and the televisions, along with this 12-volt system here, which is what powers our solenoids and our shaker motor. So by pushing that one button, everything should power up nicely. And the other thing that Daryl added was a second relay to a switch which will be on the back of the cabinet that my mom can turn on to put it in what we call a quiet mode, which will turn off all the solenoids because they are loud, and the shaker motor. So if she wants to play this at night, because she is in a senior apartment complex, she'll be able to play at night without making all the noise and waking the neighbors up. So you can see there was a lot of wiring, but everything is very cleanly installed. You can see he's got everything running that wire track, and just an amazing job. Super clean install on our virtual cabinet. And here you can see the final results of our speaker installation. We basically added this grill mesh over the top. I'll show you what the actual framework of that little cover looks like here. And we're real happy with the results. So that's the final look of the speaker. So here's a quick view of the back side of the cabinet. Just want to point out the craftsmanship. You can see here Daryl did the 45-degree cuts, and then he actually routed the edges to a little bevel, a little bull nose, so that it matches the lockdown bar. And right here you can see we have our 200mm fan. That's our air intake. And up at the top here you can see we have another 140mm exhaust fan. And if we come around here, We've also kept this part open so air can get out there as well. And we really liked the case design on the Samsung QLEDs. So we basically wanted to just leave them sticking out. And you can see that some of Daryl's other handiwork. He fabricated those brackets. He did the welding. You can also see at the very top here, there's actually even a rubber stopper at the top, just in case somebody raises the table too high and it ends up hitting the ceiling. So we come back down here, and this is the quiet mode switch that my mom can get to from the front. That will turn off all the solenoids so she can play it at night without disturbing her neighbors. And then the thing we're really proud of, so this little box here, this is your internet and your power. Those are the only two cables that go into this unit. Everything else is self-contained, and it turned out really well. So that's the backside that nobody will ever see, but just wanted to give you guys a quick view of how it all came together. Thank you so much for watching our little up-close, behind-the-scenes view of our virtual pinball cabinet. I do appreciate everyone taking the time to see what we're putting out there. And if you like content like this, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below. So the only thing left, I guess, is to wrap it up and give it to my mother. So until next time, remember to get your game on. Keep going.